Man, if there's one thing I ever thought about after playing Crash Bandicoot is that I would really like Cortex to give me some head. I've been playing Crash for as long as I can remember, quite literally, but despite growing up a fan of the series, I fell off the wagon during the transition to the Xbox 360 and PS3 era, and the first game that I would ever skip in the entire franchise would be Crash of the Titans. I didn't have an Xbox 360 or a PS2 when the game was being marketed, and I had freshly moved to Australia with no friends to talk about games. Honestly, I didn't find out Crash even had a new game until a couple of years later, when a friend offhandedly mentioned the Crash game he had on 360. Confused and dismayed to find out not only was Crash still around, but it was nothing like the Crash I grew up with. A prime emphasis on brawler-style combat, drastic redesigns of the entire cast, and not a single power crystal or crate to be found. The biggest sin to me, however, was how Crash's signature spin attack now made him dizzy. That's like rebooting Doom and having Doom Guy run out of stamina. Wait, shit, they did that in Doom 3. That's like a Mario game where you can't jump. Shit, those were actually really good games. You get what I mean. Maybe if I'd given Crash of the Titans a chance, I would have loved it. From what I've played in passing, it's a finely crafted action-adventure game with a lovely art direction outside of its weird character designs, vast and impressive open play spaces, some pretty self-aware and comedic dialogue.
Strange things are afoot. Yes, I know I don't have feet. Let's just go already.
And genuine aspirations to increase the scope of the world Crash and his friends inhabit. Admittedly, the characters' shifts in personalities are pretty jarring. The most irritating change, though, was Crash Bandicoot himself. Instead of being a bit of a wild animal with a carefree attitude, a bit like if Sonic grew up in the hippie movement, Crash is a gibbering idiot who blurts out random noises and pulls strange, distorted faces at any given moment. Crash has never been depicted as the sophisticated sort, often exhibiting desocialized behavior, loud physicality, and overall being a bit of a horny bastard, but he was always competent. Riding vehicles, handling weapons, taming other animals, and piloting aircraft are just some bullet points on the Bandicoot's CV. Despite not being thrilled with the characters themselves, I have to admit that animation direction in this era of Crash was absolutely on point. Plenty of squash and stretch, crystal clear telegraphed moves, and anticipation poses that clearly work in tandem with the player moveset. All 3D versions of Crash of the Titans absolutely sing when in motion. This includes, importantly, the subject of today's retrospective, Crash the Titans on the DS. Now, amazingly, I find Amaze Entertainment worked on this one as well. I didn't even know that until I opened the game up and saw the logo and had to chuckle to myself. In case you've forgotten, these guys did LEGO Star Wars 2 on the GBA and the NDS, but I'm pretty sure you didn't forget that, because let's be real, that's probably why you're here. Whereas the studio had a rocky past mantling the low-powered 3D hardware of the system, it's with great relief I tell you that what they've pulled off with Crash of the Titans is very impressive. From the very get-go, we're gifted with some FMV gameplay footage, which was incredibly uncommon for a game on such a small cartridge. This is why LEGO Star Wars The Complete Saga, to make an easy example, used these pseudo-animated cutouts to mimic the main version's cutscenes. Comboing on from the impressive feat that was the FMV, we get fully voiced dialogue in certain cutscenes, with original dialogue that tells a cut-down, alternate story to the main release.
Well done, Crash. Now we must quickly visit each of the islands and collect the mojo power there. Together we'll use the power of your enemies against them.
Writing is actually pretty entertaining here too. Lex Lang absolutely chews the scenery as Dr. Neo Cortex, but honestly, what else did you expect?
Huh? What more do you want from me? Do you want me to mention that you can upgrade abilities at the Evolution Kiosk? Or that you can try your luck on the pachinko machine for additional rewards? Well, I won't! You'll have to figure it out for yourself. Ah! You did it again! This dreaded tutorial is now officially over! I'll see you in the boss showdown!
The audio presentation remains solid throughout in spite of the hardware, and boasts an entertaining, albeit repetitive, soundtrack to underpin the madness. We even get a few classic Crash sounds to sweeten the deal. Even more remarkable, however, are the game's visuals. Featuring long-length levels, some wide-open spaces, and excellently executed animations on Crash himself, the DS version holds its own, especially considering the competition, and especially considering some of Amaze's past work. The DS itself is not remembered fondly for its graphical prowess in the 3D field, being far outclassed technically by the far more powerful PlayStation Portable. In fact, from what I can put together, the PSP version of Titans is almost a straight port sans a few features. However, it's the DS version that grabs my attention. Unlike the other versions of the game, it's Crash the Titans on the DS that is the most faithful to the original Crash Bandicoot games. I don't know how it happened, I don't know why it happened, but it's the case. Whether the result of a miscommunication between prototyping and final versions between the main and sub-studios, or the DS version was almost done before the main version was changed, or it's a deliberate design decision made by Amaze Entertainment, I don't know. What I do know is that crates are here. I can bounce on them, smash them, and if I break enough, I'll even earn a gem for it. Admittedly, they're a lot less satisfying to break than they used to be. Crash is still equipped with a combat-focused moveset, rather than a quick and simple spin attack. You can spin attack with the right combo to some extent, and unlike the console versions, you don't get dizzy. When the game focuses on this, it's an absolute blast. Crash feels good to control, his jump arc perfectly dictated by his animation, movement feels precise most of the time, and aside from some minor collision issues, platforming feels smooth and rewarding. Unfortunately, there's also a lot of time in this game where you won't be doing that. More often than not, you're gonna have to mount a Titan, a large enemy that Crash possesses with Aku Aku in the vein of Mario Odyssey. Then, promptly, you get into a rhythm of working through the smaller enemies and then jacking onto the bigger boss of the bunch. This is based on the core gameplay loop of the main version, but it's how the DS port integrates this with the classic Crash formula that makes things interesting. You need the bigger dudes to sometimes break these huge crates, or to leap off them Yoshi style to reach higher areas. There's an entire mechanic here in the process of managing your Titans as a resource, making sure you're equipped to locate the next collectible, or take on the next wave of enemies. Admittedly, more could have been done here. The specific Titan's abilities are never used to create opportunities in the level design, and are mostly different on a cosmetic level. The only Titan I ever found that made a difference to platforming was this spring dude, but even then, it was never properly accommodated for. The real Achilles heel in this system, though, is the tiny draw distance, because inevitably, you will have to jack off your Titan. Once you do depart your Titan, he disappears into the night, shrinking to infinity, in what I can only assume is some degree of infinite torment. I cannot describe how many times I abandoned my Titan, only to take a few paces forward and have an enormous crate appear as if out of thin air. A spectral humiliation device floating on the horizon, I would be forced to confront the error of my judgments, and promptly jump off the nearest ledge to try the section again. This is because Titans don't respawn, which is a shame because it would remedy this problem perfectly. This is likely to stop you from farming mojo from repeat kills, but I don't see it as a huge ask to employ some sort of system that prevents respawned enemies from dropping mojo. These guys are integral to completing a level 100%, so there has to be a less punishing way of re-equipping yourself. And speaking of mojo, I need to talk about the game's collectible system. This meter here, right? This is this in disguise, there are no two ways about it. It's also incredibly punishing. You're gonna have to scrounge to get this baby filled. There are no mojo multipliers to be found either, so it's not like you can come back and have an easier go of it with some sort of extra item. You can even break all the crates in a level and still not fill out the mojo meter. I mean, this thing is brutal. You gotta make sure you pick up every little piece of mojo that you find. You're also going to be tasked with finding these masks. Originally I thought there'd be a few bronzes, a couple silvers, and maybe one gold. I was right about the gold, but holy hell, look how many of these there are! When it comes to gaining mojo and masks, you'll find the bulk of these are typically hidden away in bonus levels, in which the game's platforming really shines. These are pretty much bonus levels in tune with the original games, which focus entirely on platforming and feature no combat at all. It's also where the game features the most complex crate setups you'll find. TNTs, nitros, bounce crates, and more all work together to create a cohesive platforming gauntlet. Admittedly, it's baby stuff compared to the punishing originals, but for a first on the platform, it's a really novel attempt. 3D platforming is also consistently easy, with sections having basic pitfalls or obstacles. Contrastingly, the combat can be incredibly brutal and punishing, especially if you haven't been grinding mojo to purchase upgrades. Yep, Crash has stats, and you gotta pump some iron into the orange lad if you want to stop getting one-hit creamed by the big rabbit things.
Are you sure?
It's easy to forget the importance, unfortunately, because the power gap between controlling Crash and riding a Titan is so wide that you forget how much of a pissant our hero really is by comparison, when you haven't been in his shoes for a good few minutes. This is especially frustrating if you think you're doing okay, only to get 3/4 of the way through the level and hit a brick wall with some infallible beast. Whilst not perfect, Crash levels are a good throwback with a somewhat decent attempt at being a brawler, and somehow tying the gameplay styles together. On the flip side of each level, there's also a bonus section. These are very touchscreen dependent and completely optional for progression. I tried a couple, and whilst inoffensive, I didn't really find the motivation to do more than a couple. If you've ever even smelled a DS in your life, you played something like this already, so it's likely not gonna rock your world either. More interestingly, after finishing each of the game's first 4 island areas, you get to play as Nina, in a brief section where you run through a new area using the Mutator Ray 3000 to mutate the local wildlife whilst avoiding the animal's brutal love? Nina, really do be cold though. Later on, you'll be playing through those areas as Crash and fighting those very same mutants that Nina created. It's a really surprising and unique way of storytelling and situation building done through simple gameplay. It's a concept I can see far outgrowing this product, and something I think could be the entire base of a narrative framework for another game. For what it is in this though, it's charming, surprising, and best of all, actually pretty funny just in its concept and followed through with its execution. The only downside is having to reload by using the touchscreen. Good lord, I do not miss mandatory touchscreen mechanics. The last gameplay section we're going to cover is the bosses. Their quality is varied. Most of them are simple, use titans to beat up the bad guy. Tiny Tigers is regretfully a touchscreen based physics heavy battle of spinning balls, and honestly I think I completed this one completely by luck. Initially, I had a ton of trouble with the end boss, which is, as you probably guessed, a huge Robox with Cortex at the helm. I just couldn't seem to hit him no matter what, until I realized the game was trying to target me towards another Titan instead of, I don't know, the giant spider in front of me? Once I figured out how to punch him in the face though, piece of piss. He went down like a sack of bricks. The ending played out, and there I was wondering if this was really the end of the game.
Sounds like an adventure! Whatever happened to Nina?
Well, upon a quick trip to Google, I discovered my suspicions to be correct. Collecting all of the collectibles and completing all the events to get all the gems nets you this.
Engine, get the robot back to working order.
Yes, ma'am.
Now we're gonna do something really fun. To Wumpa Island! We've got some pristine nature to smash.
Extra few seconds of the cutscene at the end. Oh, sorry, did I fall asleep? I was having a really good dream about not having to do that. Seriously, I think it sucks when games are this dense with collectibles and then do very little to reward the player for getting them. It's not like we're unlocking new sides to old levels or new levels entirely like we are in the original Crash games. We're just proving to the game that we have enough time that it takes to scour all of the levels on end for each and every collectible. It's also extremely hard to invest that much in a version of the game too, that, no matter how creatively divergent, just doesn't hold the title of the core experience. And I think more side games or handheld ports or what have you should have designed their collectibles in a way that was cognizant of that fact. Crash of the Titans on DS will always remain as a curious half-step between eras for the sunburnt marsupial, a visual clash of identities, and a very different Crash of the Titans. That was... come on, that was good wordplay, come on. Do I get a race for that? Anybody? Is anyone here?